Once there was a woman who was a master baker. Her bread tasted like cake, and her cakes, oh, they tasted heavenly. Everyone for miles around wanted one of her cakes for their special occasions. Weddings, births, all the family gatherings that were the special ones. They wanted one of her cakes. She was fair and good-hearted into the bargain, too. If someone had money to pay, she charged a fair price. But if they didn't, she gave the cake as a gift to the family with her best wishes. She was a master baker, and she was a very clever woman. It was the first that got her into trouble, and it was the second that got her out of it. For you see, everyone loved her cakes so much they ate every single bite. Sometimes they licked the plate. There wasn't so much as a crumb left for a poor fairy to eat. And you know, fairies do like a bit of cake. The fairies, the good people, the wee folk. Well, they got together and they talked about this problem. How could they get some of this woman's cake? And they decided they would have to kidnap her and take her to fairyland, and there she would bake cakes for them whenever they wanted. Well, their chance came sooner than they expected. One of the fairies was listening at the keyhole to the woman's house and heard the woman talking to her husband. "Well, my dear, tomorrow you will have to look after our wee babe by yourself, for I need to go to the castle to make the cakes for the princess's wedding the day after. I'll be gone by sunrise and home in the moonlight." Well, the fairies were delighted that their chance had come, and they knew the path as well as the woman did, the path from her house to the castle. And there was a little place on the way back, a little fairy hill, and there the fairies all gathered and waited for the woman to come. They hid behind the long grasses, under the leaves, in the flower cups, and they waited. And when the moon was in the sky and the woman came singing down the road, tired as she was, when she came to that place, they all flew out at her all at once and threw fern seed into her eyes. "Goodness, the fireflies are thick this night," said the woman. She thought it was the fireflies, but it was the fairies, with the moonlight sparkling on their wings. Well, the fern seed in her eyes made her sleepy, and she rubbed her eyes and said, "Goodness, I'm so sleepy. I don't think I can walk another step. I'll just have to lay down here on this little hill and rest my eyes for a minute before I make the rest of my way home." And so she did. She lay down on the little hill. But this was no ordinary hill. It was a fairy mound. And when she closed her eyes right away, she slept. And when she woke up, she was in fairyland. She had a good idea how she'd gotten there, and she did not intend to stay. But she didn't let on. Instead, she looked around with a big smile at all of the fairies, the wee folk, the good people looking up at her. "Well, it's all my life I've wanted to have a peep of fairyland, and here I am. "What can I do for you, good people?" Well, the fairies were delighted that she wasn't upset with them for kidnapping her and bringing her to fairyland, and they explained about the cakes. "Oh, of course, I'd be glad to make cakes for you. Let's start right now," she said, and took a fresh apron out of her bag and put it on. "Now, bring me your biggest bowl." Well, the biggest bowl in fairyland was a little flower cup. "Oh, that's not big enough," she said. "You'll have to go back to my little house. In my little kitchen, you'll find my big crockery bowl." So the fairies, off they went to fetch the bowl. It was a big crockery bowl. It took a lot of fairies to bring it back, and they were tired. But there was more to do. They had to go back and forth, fetching all of her spoons and wisps and eggs and milk and butter and sugar and flour. Oh, all the back and forth. They were tired. But they were cheered when they saw her starting to mix and stir all of the ingredients that they'd brought for her. And then it was time to beat the batter, and she picked up her wisp, and she was just about to start beating the batter when she let down the spoon with a big sigh. "What is it?" said the Fairy King. "Oh, it's my dog. He snores in a special rhythm, and that's the rhythm I use to beat the batter, and I don't think I could get it right without him." "Fetch the dog," said the Fairy King. And soon there were the fairies, carrying back the dog, who was quite surprised, and the fairies were very tired. And the dog curled up beside her and started to snore. So she picked up the wisp again. Oh, with a big sigh, she set it down again. "What is it?" said the Fairy King. "Oh, it's my cat. She purrs with a certain rhythm, and, well, I don't think I could beat the batter with the right rhythm without her." "Fetch the cat," said the Fairy King. And before they knew it, there was the cat, curling up beside her, not surprised at all. And the cat began to purr. And the woman picked up the wisp and was about to start beating the batter. Oh, and another big sigh, and she set it down again. "What is it now?" asked the Fairy King. "Well, it's my wee babe, and him with a new tooth coming in this day. You know, I've been away from him since sunrise this morning, and I miss him so much." "Fetch the babe," said the Fairy King. And soon there was the babe, and the fairies were getting more and more tired. And what does the wee babe do when he hasn't seen his mamma all day long? Well, he began to cry. "Well, perhaps my husband could quiet the babe. I can't set down the whisk now." "Fetch the husband," said the Fairy King, and off they went to bring the woman's husband, and he was very surprised to be brought into fairyland. But when he saw his wife, he smiled. And he picked up the babe, but the babe did not stop crying because it was his mama he wanted. The baby was crying, and the woman whispered to her husband, "Step on the tail of the dog." So he did, and the dog started howling. "Step on the tail of the cat." And so he did. And the cat started yowling. And now the cat was yowling, the dog was howling, and the babe was crying. There was so much noise, and the fairies were very upset. The fairies were so upset with all of this noise, because if there's one thing fairies don't like, it's noise. And what's more, the woman knew this all along. They were flying around with their hands over their ears, looking very agitated. And then the batter was ready. The woman set down the wisp. She picked up her babe in her arms and popped a bit of sugar into his mouth, and he stopped crying. She gave the signal to her husband to stop stepping on the tail of the cat and the dog. And he stopped. And the cat stopped yowling, and the dog stopped howling, and the babe was calm and quiet, and everything was quiet again. And the fairies started to settle down. but they were looking very tired. "Well, the cake's ready to put in the oven. Where's your oven?" The Fairy King looked at the fairies, and they at him. Their shoulders and their wings were drooping. "We don't have an oven," said the Fairy King, "and we're too tired to go and get yours." "Oh, you poor wee folk," she said, "you must have your cake. I'll tell you what. I'll go and take the batter back home. I'll put it in my little oven in my own little kitchen. And when the cake is ready, I will bring it, and I will set it on the hill where you found me. And what's more, I'll set one there every week's end for you." The fairies were delighted and looked so cheered up, even though they were still very tired. And the Fairy King said, "And we'll leave a gift for you every week's end." And he commanded for the fairy mound to open, and out walked the woman, with her babe in her arms, and her husband beside her carrying the cake batter and all of her tools, and the cat and dog behind them. And when she got home, she baked the cake, and when it was ready, she kept her word to the good people, and she took the cake to the fairy mound, and there she put it down, and she saw a little bag. She picked it up. Inside was a golden coin, and every week's end she kept her promise to the fairies, and every week's end she took a cake, and every week's end they left her a piece of gold. And so the woman and her family prospered. And the fairies, the wee folk, the good people, they had their cake.